So welcome to this 20th podcast, and as I've said earlier, it's a spontaneous podcast that we are making, and I've got today, I'm thinking what was I going to do it about today, and it's very convenient because at this very moment I'm very busy recording the complete, contemporary clavier von Bach, and almost I'm actually more than halfway through, and I wanted to talk about that. I think it's a good idea to give you some idea of what I'm thinking about when I'm recording this. Before I go on, may I please ask you, if you're enjoying this podcast or my podcasts, please do like it and subscribe to the channel. It would be wonderful if you can do that, because that helps us very much. The podcast that, as I said, is going to be about listening to the World Contemporary Clavier. Quite something. I think that the World Contemporary Clavier is one of the great things to listen to and to train the listening. We can learn a lot about listening from just listening to these pieces. And I could even mention a few things that I think are maybe good to do, because they're not, we don't hear much about this. And I think it's very important that it does exist. There are many things happening in the preludes and fugues that are beautiful, really incredible things. And this is something we're busy very much only thinking of the historical background, which is of course important, but there's much more to the piece. And what I've often noticed is often people who are playing these works, you hear always the themes of the fugues. The themes of the fugues are played often loudly to make them very, very clear. I would even say too clear, because it's not always what's happening in the themes, it's what's happening around the themes. And this is really the great thing of Bach, because actually even when you just listen to one fugue, there's one main theme, but in fact that theme is always sounding completely different by what's happening all around it. And it's in the surroundings that he makes the piece, the fugues, really live. This is what makes them really tick, in my opinion. And there are some things and some passages which I've noticed really are fascinating to think about. One of these is, for instance, if we take, first of all, the prelude, it's a little easier to take that as a beginning. And when I play, for instance, the E flat minor prelude out of the first book, that's one that begins like this. A marvelous beginning. An absolutely brilliant beginning. Just, I don't know how it comes to you, but when I hear that very first chord, it just stays, that time now after it's been played, here, that moment, actually the second beat, is full of energy. It's actually almost a spiritual moment. You hear that, and then this comes out. Just going to this note, so simple. And here, a question. That change there, at once you notice a so incredible moment. Again, to listen to that. And now what comes now? Who would be able to think of that? I mean, this is something unique. All the rules would say never such a jump. I mean, that'd be that, but it just works. And that's what happens here. And here. Amazing. These things somehow we don't hear, because when you're playing it, often, as you hear it often, it sounds a little bit like this. Gives you a bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. And listening very much to how the chords just change in the most remarkable way, how they sound, they sort of give you the time to reflect. I really hope that you can hear that, because it's something I think is very important in the performance of these pieces. I think we need definitely to hear that. How do we do this? We've got to give sometimes not more time, but the suggestion of more time. The suggestion is something which is a little bit different than giving more time. It's just a little less than that. And I think we just, in fact, there's not even a comma, and it can make a huge, huge difference. It's often these very small moments that make the idea of a piece becoming quite, well, I would say magical in a way, and really, really inspiring. But the thing is also, in a way, it shows us the improvisational genius of Bach, the way he could actually create a piece from the most simple thing. That's, of course, with the prelude, easier to follow. But when we listen to the fugues, we're going to find the same thing. I think that Bach was a genius in many ways, many more ways than people realize. For instance, also in the way of actually playing. You know, if I take, for instance, a fugue subject, I take a fugue subject from, I think it's the G sharp minor fugue from the first book, I think it is. Yes, it is. And if I take that, and it sounds like this, and you can play it in different ways. For instance, let me show you. that's what it sounds like. But Bach has done something amazing. He has actually put the movement in. Just watch this. And I do it slowly. Now let me do it in tempo more. Now, what we often hear is this. And so on. Quite a different way of playing. I believe that Bach would have made use of this. I think his fugue themes, and not only that, also the themes of many. I think he's thinking of the way of the arm, and not. It might sound okay, but it's different. I think it's. You hear then. You can hear small things happening. The idea is to have a sort of rubato that's not rubato. A rubato that couldn't even be called rubato, because it's in fact what I would call a micro increase of sound of time for a certain note. Something you can't even a metronome won't register it. The metronome will keep on going like this. Nadia Boulanger, if I remember rightly, she was one of the great pedagogues in France who actually considered these things. She mentioned that there were certain people who could play with a certain inner rubato that was nothing like a rubato. It was, in fact, a breathing of the rhythm, and done with micro, small, extra elements that cannot even be registered, so small. And the amazing thing is that when someone plays like that, they actually sound really, that an ordinary rhythm becomes such a lively thing. It changes the whole rhythm. And if you play it, what I would call academically, it just doesn't seem to have any of that life anymore. The life seems to disappear from the piece. Now, this is one of my concepts about working on the World Contemporary de Clavier. And I'm very, very busy with all these sort of things, trying to find a way to perform it, to get the life of the piece existing and developing from inside the music. And I really believe strongly that Bach was such a genius. He was being asked by all the great people, the builders of cathedrals, how to make the acoustics, how must the acoustics be in a cathedral. He was busy working on organs, how to build the best Baroque organ in those days. And he really was doing these things, all of it. A sort of Leonardo da Vinci character. And I think, as I said, I think he's actually worked also a little bit the movement of how the hands work. We don't know very much. We only know a few things. We know that Bach wanted legato. He believed in cantabile, because we know that from the preface of the second and the third three-part inventions. We can conclude that he really wanted those things to be really coming out. He wanted singing. He was busy with singers, of course, with all the cantatas and everything. He was absolutely so much busy with voices. And definitely in all of these pieces, they must be sung. And I think in singing of the great time of the bel canto, the great singers of probably of Bach's time and later, we can only go back until around about 1902 or 3. I've got recordings from those periods of Battistini and all these great Lucas and also many others, Tetrasini and some of these people, singing in the 1920s and 1910 period. We can still hear some of the incredible vocal way of singing, which is demonstrating what I'm saying about micro rhythms, just very playing exactly right in rhythm, in the tempo, but changing just such a small element in it. Very much like what Nadia Boulanger mentioned. Well, I've been rambling on, but I hope you'll forgive me. And I could actually play, should I play you this prelude? Let me play you this prelude. It's probably a nice idea to end the podcast. Thank you for listening.